Hackers gonna hack. But now companies are taking preemptive measures to fight back. It's called strike back technology, and the purpose is to distract or delay hacking attempts instead of trying to prevent them. Companies are now on the offense to lure cyber criminals into their systems. And in some cases, they're hiring contractors to hack to find their security breaches. Kevin Mitnick, once known as America's most wanted hacker, spent 5 years in a federal prison and is now working for the other side. To join me now is Kevin Mitnick himself. He's the author of Ghost in the Wires and an information security consultant. Thanks for joining me, Kevin. I wanted you to elaborate more on the strategy that these companies are initiating to lure hackers. What is this methodology?
Well, this is a technology called honeypots, and it's been around for quite some time. And this is where companies either acquire or they build systems that appear to hold juicy information to attract the attackers, and that way they could monitor and kind of profile how they're getting into the system and try to identify where they're coming from. And this has been around for quite some time.
Kevin, how did you go from being the one, once known as the most wanted hacker in the country to working for the other side?
Well, after I was arrested and I was in prison for quite some time, I sat in pretrial detention for about 4.5 years, and then I finally settled the case with the government. I ended up doing 5 years in federal custody for hacking. It wasn't for profit. It was mostly for intellectual challenge. And about 3 months after I was released, Senator Fred Thompson called me to testify for Congress on how the federal government could better protect their systems. And at that point, that was kind of my transition into now helping government, private sector companies, and universities protect themselves against the threats out there.
So you weren't released early in order to help companies and the government. You served your term and then afterward kind of got recruited.
Yeah, pretty much my case is, very unusual. I sat in solitary confinement in a federal detention center for about a year because a federal prosecutor had told a judge that I could simply pick up the phone, dial up to NORAD, and whistle into the phone, communicate with their modem that's connected to their computer, and launch a nuclear missile. So there was a lot of hyperbole around my case, and I sat in pretrial detention for a long time. But what's great today is I still do the same thing. I still hack into systems, but I do it with the company's permission to help them find the vulnerabilities before the attackers do. So it's very enjoyable. It's kind of like Pablo Escobar becoming a pharmacist.
Kevin, you just said that you were in solitary confinement based on an absurd notion that you could call in and launch a nuclear bomb. How was that even warranted? I mean, and what was your experience in solitary confinement like? What did that do to you?
Well, back then, this was, quite some time ago, computers were still mystical, hackers were still mystical, and so a lot of events and motion pictures like war games and sneakers, what happened is, unfortunately, government prosecutors took events out of fictional movies and attributed them to me in real life. And sitting in solitary confinement, imagine going into your bathroom at home and only being able to leave 1 hour a day for 5 days a week. It's a pretty horrific experience, especially when you're in there for some mythology. But I'm able to put that all behind me, and I really enjoy, enjoy being able to hack, but being able to help companies really protect themselves. And that's kind of my mission today, is really to help. And one of the methods, and as you mentioned on the show earlier, this whole notion of companies being upset and, obviously, because they're continuing to be victimized by attackers, that they're trying to set up systems that lure the bad guys to companies. Sometimes, we're lured to a honeypot. We're pretty, we're able to quickly figure out what's going on. But this whole honeypot, it's kind of like, attracting the bad guys to this system to really keep them busy. There's fake files in there that look like valuable information. It could be credit card, bank accounts. It could be R&D information or whatever the company sets up. And you keep the attackers there. You profile them. You see where they're coming from, and then you use that information, that intelligence, to protect your core systems, the real systems that you do not want anyone in.
Kevin, I wanted to get more into your personal story. You were on the Colbert Report last year, and
Yes.
I wanted to play a quick clip from that.
Okay.
What do you think? If you did what you did today, I'm sure you wouldn't be put in solitary, but
Guantanamo Bay.
Guantanamo Bay, you think?
Probably. I mean, now that in this post 9/11 world, I think hacking is almost considered a form of terrorism.
So, Kevin, that statement holds so much more significance now. Here we are, almost a year later after the whole anonymous thing coming out and just these takedowns of government websites, and also just the ratcheting up of cyber terrorism, fear-mongering from our government. Do you see hacking still as maybe the #1 domestic terrorist threat, or do you see that as kind of the fear of them painting it as a new terrorist threat?
Well, I look at it as kind of FUD, a lot of hyperbole, because when you paint a threat, the government is able to pass laws and get votes by the House and by Congress to pass these laws like the Patriot Act. But where the really interesting, I guess, development, if you will, over the past year or so was the revelation of Stuxnet and Flame. And these were cyber weapons developed by the United States and possibly Israel to attack Iranian nuclear facilities, to basically cause disruption, to cause delay of whatever projects they were working on at the time. So I think this is really important, because while the United States could use cyber weapons against countries like Iran, that we could be victimized the same way. Other countries could victimize us by developing very malicious code that goes under the radar of antivirus software and infects our systems, targets companies here to do industrial espionage, or targets defense contractors to get information on government projects. So I think it's a substantial threat, and what the I guess security industry needs to do is come up with better tools and solutions to try to mitigate that threat.
So you don't think CISPA is the answer to combat this kind of threat?
Can you repeat that? You were cutting out.
Oh, I was asking, do you think that the legislation that they've proposed, CISPA, do you think that that's a good combatant to this threat?
I actually didn't read the legislation, so I'm sorry I can't answer that. I apologize.
No problem. It's pretty broad legislation. But Kevin, going back to what you just said about the cyber weapons, what do you think about the U.S. essentially creating a blueprint for cyber warfare against this country? What do you think that's going to do?
Well, I don't think it's really a blueprint. I think that any country could employ a skilled team of developers to develop malicious code. I really think it comes down to time, money, and organization. And so I think any country, and even the Russian business network that allegedly develops malware to attack consumers to steal information for fraud, I think, again, it all really comes down to the money and to the sophistication of the people that they can hire to develop these tools. And it's quite easy. I mean, I'm hired to test these, and we have about a 98% success rate when doing a technical engineering. It uses manipulation, deception, and influence to get a person inside a company to comply with the request. And that request is simply to click on a hyperlink in an email or open up a booby-trapped PDF document. And if one employee makes that bad decision and opens up that booby-trapped PDF file, for example, that could allow the attacker to take full control of that user's computer that's connected to the company's network, and now they're in. And that's how easy it is. And with these types of tests that we do on companies, we have a 100% success rate. So what that really tells us is security is pretty bad. And it's not really difficult for attackers to get into corporations, into Department of Defense organizations. It's actually quite easy. And we're hoping that new technologies are developed, new training and educational tools are developed to help mitigate the threat.
But Kevin, I mean, it was the most sophisticated worm inserted into the Iranian nuclear facility, and it could, and now people have access to it. I mean, it's pretty much released out there how to replicate this. I know you're saying a lot of people already could figure it out on their own, but you didn't really answer my question before about the threat that the government might use anonymous and hackers as kind of the new terrorist threat. I mean, when you look at this kind of ubiquitous organization like Anonymous, or not organization, but group, what do you think about them with the takedowns of these government websites and really just this ratcheting up of cyber terrorism? Do you think that that's going to, what do you think about that?
I would label it cyber terrorism. I mean, what I consider terrorism is flying airplanes into buildings. What I look about like Anonymous and LulzSec, that these were young adults that really enjoyed the media attention from compromising sites and exposing information, private information of companies and even consumers. And these sites that were attacked were using very basic techniques. It wasn't like this was an ultra-skilled group like the developers of Stuxnet and Flame. And as we all know, the individuals involved with LulzSec were arrested. They were all like 19 and 20-year-olds using very basic to intermediate types of hacking techniques that are actually no big deal. So I don't really think that is really an indicator of cyber warfare or cyber terrorism. I think it's a real indicator that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there, and that companies really need their defense.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving us your opinion about all this. That was Kevin Mitnick, author of the book Ghosts in the Wires.